Yeah, crack it open.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode without Gary Arndt of Respecting the Beer. We have a fantastic panel with me this afternoon. I am joined, as always, by my good friend, the brewer extraordinaire, Mr. Bobby Fleshman.
Bobby,
Actually. Oh, my bad.
Dr. Bobby.
Excuse me, Dr. Bobby Fleshman.
It actually is Bobby. So that was a big fight I had with the university. True. They wanted to make it Robert, but
he's
it
not
really
Robert.
is Bobby.
Yeah, no, you're a Bobby. I couldn't see you as a Robert. We are, of course, also blessed today. This is my second ever episode hosting, and she's glaring at me again, isn't she? I can see her out of the corner of my eye.
The listeners can feel it.
Yes, you can feel the glare. I am joined by the chemist, mathematician extraordinaire, Dr. Allison McCoy Bones Fleshman. How are you today?
Good.
That's it? That's all I'm going to get on?
Star Trek reference in
Right.
case.
She was too busy glaring at me. And we are also blessed to have, all the way from Madison via Alaska and New Jersey and Stevens Point and all points in between, we are blessed to have Lauren and Nia from the Herbiery. Did I get that right? I've been working on it in my mind. How did I do?
Yes, yeah, Herbiery. You
got
it
great.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I gave just a little bit of a tease about the background, starting in being born here in Wisconsin and finding your way to Alaska, being driven out by the winter and, so on and so forth. You've had, Nia, particularly you've had a pretty remarkable journey. And I'm wondering if you can give us just a kind of a quick snapshot of you and your journey in beer.
Yeah. So, like you said, I was born in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and lived there for the first 4 years of my life in a farmhouse, connected to this outdoor spaces here, and then lived in Southern California with my family from there, back to the Midwest outside of Chicago. And beer's always been around in my life, and my dad and his friends, and went deer hunting since I was 13, and just not that that's connected to beer intrinsically, but it's a very Wisconsin experience with beer in particular. And then after graduating high school in Naperville, Illinois, went to college in Western Illinois, and before going up to Rapid City, South Dakota, and getting into outdoor education, doing canoe trips with middle school and high school students. And through that, I started getting into herbalism. And that is kind of how I came to beer, to be more involved directly in the making of beer, was through herbalism. We had experts come and speak to the participants on our trips, 3 to 4 day trips with middle school and high school students. And
for someone who doesn't know, can you define herbalism for those of us novices in the room?
Sure. Herbalism is just applying botanical or knowledge of plants in any way to make concoctions or various makes that people then can ingest in ways that are... let me be more concise.
It's so broad.
It's
broad.
Yeah.
You can apply the knowledge of plants and what they offer to so many different disciplines. And beer is one of them. And that's what you specialize in really interesting and exciting ways. But to define herbalism is really hard, right?
Because I imagine.
So intertwined with so much of what we do, and perhaps more than we really think about all the different things we interact with plants on a regular basis.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think that's why I like the story to be rambling a little bit, because it is, plants are all around us, and I was connected to them in so many different ways that finding my way to beer through herbs and plants and is why Herbiery is the way it is. It's why Herbiery brews without hops and with herbs exclusively, because of that herbal experience prior to getting into brewing. I imagine if I had learned more about beer or brewing before getting into herbalism, it might be different. I'm not sure.
Do you think the fact that you have touched so many different parts of the country has impacted the vision that you have? Because I mean, I was, if I had been putting thumbtacks in a map when you were talking, I mean, you've been, all over the place. You've studied in New England. You've spent time on the West Coast in Alaska, the Midwest. Do you think that the variance of your travel has, kind of, I would say, informed what you're doing right now?
Definitely. And it's opened my mind to brew in this way and in general. But all the variety of experiences has also led me to want to brew in a truly local and tied to place way, which, being connected with Lauren here to farm and grow herbs for Herbiery together is part of that. And us meeting a year and a half ago has fed into that passion, definitely.
So Herbiery is a brewery that makes beer but doesn't use hops. My mind is absolutely blown away by this. So when did you open?
It started incorporated in 2018 and brewed our first batch of beer in the summer of 2019 at Ale Asylum in Madison, Wisconsin.
Cool, yeah.
I worked there for about 6 months before getting a contract for production going with one of the owners there, Dean Coffey. He was very enthusiastic and supportive. And so is everybody at Ale Asylum. Joe Waltz, somebody who is doing quality control with them and is now at Carbon 4, who I currently contract produce beer with. And 2019, we produced first batches of beer in the summer. And the idea behind the contract producing we've been running for a long time, but I think a lot of people haven't heard about us because we contract produce and we just have a tap room more recently. The idea behind the contract producing was to go to a place where I could bring herbal beer to as many people as possible, wanting to grow and share this really cool thing with as many people as possible. And that's why I wanted to go the volume route, and contract producing kept me away from getting tied to like my own stainless steel and particular ways that would force me to brew.
It's so smart. Oh my gosh. The stainless steel is so expensive to start off. I'm already jealous of the path that you've taken.
I believe you've said that shiny things are expensive.
Shiny
shit's expensive. Yeah. That's the phrase.
Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you.
But yeah, shiny things are expensive. But
so one thing I would like to point out for the listeners, we've done an episode or two actually on the Reinheitsgebot, which is that German principle that, beer is by law, really not
German
anymore,
law.
but by German law, it has to be, consisting of water, malt, hops, etc. Later on, yeast is added to this.
Is it that it does include or at most includes?
At most include. Yeah.
So they're still within the rules. Well, okay, never mind.
Well,
but they're not including hops.
Instead of hops.
But define hops. Yeah. Like, could it be just as long as there's something to add the alpha acids?
Well, we'll get into that.
I know.
Yeah.
So excited.
They're gonna science this away from us. Both of them have chemistry and physics and all sorts of cool backgrounds and things on their placard.
I just want to use the phrase bog myrtle again.
Yeah, well, that brings me to my next point. So if you've been with us, for all of the episodes, we've also done a number of beer history podcasts. And hops, brewing is a very, very old phenomenon. And using hops in beer, if you consider the broad time frame of brewing, hops are very, very new in brewing. And prior to the Reformation, just as an example, Europeans were still using spices and herbs and whatnot in their beer. And in fact, there was a significant trade of this. It was called gruit. There was a trade of gruit. And one of Martin Luther's motivations behind switching to hops as the primary ingredient was because the Catholics in Europe had controlled the trade routes of gruit, and there was significant taxes on it. So beer has, this history of many thousands of years. And for many thousands of years, and I bring this full circle to you, Nia, for many thousands of years, they were brewing in the same way that you are, which is with different herbs and things like that. And I think, we were talking before we hopped on air. We're very, very interested in how, in this, particularly in Wisconsin. I mean, this is a beer state. This is a lager state, and we all love our IPAs and whatnot. How are you able to create either some of those traditional flavors? I know you mentioned doing some different things too. How have you been able to create the beer flavors using some of the ingredients that you employ?
The way that I brew kind of destroys the idea behind beer for people of it needing to have hops, and it shows people what beer really is, and it's not so hop based. I think I can create traditional lagers flavors and Kolsch flavors and expressions that people are expecting to taste because they're not really expecting to taste hops in a lot of styles. IPAs and various different kinds of hop-centric styles, like even Pilsners or some lagers as well, Helles lagers and things like that. Obviously, I can't do that in the ways that people would expect, but I think it shows people that what they're expecting is not necessarily the hops. And a lot of people who drink beer because it is the dominant beverage in the area or it's what their cultural communities drink, but it's not necessarily their favorite beverage, find that this beer is really appealing because they didn't realize that it was the hops that was turning them off, when in reality they really love malty flavors and the crispness of a lager, but that crispiness has nothing to do with hops. It has everything to do with filtration and the yeast strains that are being used and fermentation temperatures and all those things.
Are you maintaining the preservative effects of hops by your choice of herbs?
I've found that I have similar preservative timelines as far as spoilage goes, because you could brew without any herbs and beer would probably last about a year, 6 months to a year. As far as
in modern times, yeah.
What's that?
In modern times, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Sanitation as we have. Yeah.
Sanitization, alcohol production, it's all defined and expected and able to be hit. As far as flavor spoilage goes, my beers far exceed the shelf stability of hoppy beers. It's one of the advantages to brewing the way that I brew. As you mentioned, alpha acids, the terpenes in hops and the oxidation that occurs so readily creates off flavors. Doesn't happen when alpha acids and terpenes, the specific terpenes, aren't present. And they're not when you brew with other herbs. A lot of herbs are antioxidant. A lot of herbs are also antimicrobial in an even broader spectrum way than hops are. And so I do find that spoilage to not be present as readily in my beers.
Would you qualify the hop industry as big botanicals in the sense that they've sort of strong-armed the way beer should be in the last few hundred years?
I would not say the hops industry is responsible for that. I would say that's more of like a patriarchal capitalism issue, and hops industry has come along for the ride, but it's more of like a general capitalism issue. And like you talked about taxation in medieval Europe and with the Protestant Reformation, a way to take taxation from the Catholic Church and put it into the Protestant Church was to get duchies and governments to pass laws that made the herb that you owned the one that they put in the thing everybody was paying taxes on. Right.
So one of the other things that we talk a lot about on this show is using science and the technology that's available to us to recreate beers over and over again. When somebody comes into the tap room here and they order, for example, they order a Public House pint, they if they've had it before, they have kind of an expectation what that's going to taste like. Do you find
an Irish stout, by the way? Yeah.
What did I say?
Did you say Irish stout? Did you preface that?
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
I just called it Public House.
Yeah. So just for
Public House
context,
is a dry Irish stout, profiling a little bit like a Guinness if you were in Belfast or Dublin or whatnot. But anyway, do you find that using herbs that you're still able to control things like color, and are you able to repetitively reproduce styles? So if I were to come into the brewery once and then I'm there 3 months later, I'm having a similar beer. And I'm asking out of ignorance. I don't know if it's as easy to do with herbs as it is with hops,
or if it's the intent.
Great. Two-part question there. Absolutely. Because it is 100% possible. Similar growing conditions, similar terroir, just like hops, you can produce the same flavors from.
And is that the local element?
Well, it would be. I'm just saying, like, if you grew the same herb in the same field every year after year, like the hops that you would source for your beers are being grown in similar places in the similar ways. That's what makes those flavors repeatable, and they're being aggregated so that they can flavor test and make sure that those are the same. You can do the same with herbs. It's easily done. As far as what we're trying to do, we're trying to do something a little bit different than that. And I think, yeah.
It's interesting, like, to distinguish between hops and herbs, because hops is an herb. It's just one herb. So yeah, you can totally do with all other herbs what you can do with hops. But I think there's also nuance to it. Like you brought up terroir, and like it really comes down to knowing the plant material that you're working with. But yeah, totally 100% able to recreate those flavors.
Yeah.
Lauren, can you give us a little bit of background on your origin story in this? We got Nia's, but I think we'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got involved in agriculture.
Oh, sure. Brewing is not my expertise. Farming is. I also found my way to farming. I didn't grow up farming. I guess the place to start would be I was living in Chicago and working as a performance artist, and found my way into the restaurant and bartending industry by way of supporting myself. And I was front of house managing for a restaurant, and our patio was the right on the edge of the Logan Square Farmers Market. And when I was working there, we acquired a liquor license. So I was working with a distributor, putting together a brunch cocktail menu, and just so inspired by the farmers and the colors and the flavors of all the produce. And something started turning for me there. I was getting totally burnt out in the service industry. It's not even sort of what I was intending to do with my time, but realizing it was like stirring something in me and wanting a deeper connection to the food that I was eating. And I've always been fascinated by beverages, so just sort of like wound my way there eventually. But at that time, I was able to make the choice to leave that job and start farming. That was a little over a decade ago. I worked at a farm in California for half a year, and then came back and started working on one of the farms that I had been volunteering on in Chicagoland area. That was Montalbano Farms in Sandwich, Illinois, and started growing vegetables there. And then worked for a native plant nursery for a couple of years, and then decided it was time to start my own farm. And at that point, working at the native plant nursery was really when I started to be captivated by the world of herbs and plants, particularly native ones that are growing around us here. And yeah, so I started my farm in 2019 and have been farming ever since.
What are some of the herbs that you are cultivating?
Well, I started pretty broadly, and at one point was growing over 200 different varieties, and realized that
that's a lot to have.
Yeah, it was definitely like inspired by just a passion and a curiosity, but slowly learned the hard way. I don't know. Slowly learned over time that like that might not be the most sustainable business model. So I am now focusing particularly on growing herbs for the beverage industry. So I'm growing wormwood, Artemisia absinthium, for a distiller who makes absinthe, and other herbs like angelica. Archangelica is typically used in gins, a variety of other things as well. There's a native species, Angelica atropurpurea, which I'm really interested in cultivating and doing some trials with distillers who might be interested, just to see if that also meets the same expectations for flavor. Tulsi, lemongrass, dandelion, those are all going in Nia's beers.
Wow.
Oh, I get dandelions every May. I could cut those and could we brew something with those here?
I think we have.
Have you?
We
I think
have
so, yeah.
Dames and Dandies.
Yeah,
It
Dames
was
and
a
Dandies.
Belgian blonde. Yeah.
Oh my.
Dames Rocket and
There we go.
dandelions. Yeah.
Nice.
That sounds great.
Yeah, there you go.
Pivoting back to beer and brewing for a second, Bobby, quick question for you. How many hops do you use in 547?
Pounds or varieties?
Varieties.
I believe we're at 6.
Oh,
So
6. Okay.
6 hops in one beer. So frame of reference. Nia, a typical beer, or pick one if you want to talk about
The
one.
most fragrant one, because I think 547 is our extreme. So what's your most, like, the max number?
Yeah, it's interesting the way that hops have been cultivated for varieties. You end up with the same plant with lots of different flavor profiles. We do a beer called the Undertree beer that has 6 or 7 different roots in it: burdock root, dandelion root, licorice root, ginger, rhizome, but sarsaparilla, it's a bark, but and then licorice. Did I say that already? Yeah, licorice root. So the licorice root, not anise or those flavorings, but licorice root itself, and then a little bit of nutmeg. Which again,
So does the root go into the boil?
Yeah,
or
that
I'm
was my
wondering
next
about
question.
the aromatics of the roots, because they probably don't smell really.
well, you did
Unless
say
you're
the
really,
most
like-
aromatic. That one's not really, because the roots
Okay.
are going in the boil and they're a little bit more background notes.
And do you do the same thing when brewers brew, where you're putting
dry hopping, so it would be called dry rooting.
right, where
Dry rooting.
you're putting things in at various points in the boil process, so that you can layer flavors and scents and bitterness and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. The process is largely similar. So different points in the boil. It comes down to often like roots you treat differently. If I were to generalize, I treat roots differently than I treat leaves and aerial parts, and then flowers are treated differently than those other two. And that's generally how I break things down. Then there's bog myrtle with catkins and all sorts of different
There it
things.
is. Bog myrtle.
There was.
You know that
You've made her
Bingo
so
card.
happy.
You know that moment when you're like, you draw something, like you draw a circle or a square on the paper, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can draw it in 3 dimensions. And then you're like, wait, is there a 4th dimension? And maybe I'm the only one that's ever had that
You
moment.
might be. Yeah, you very well could be.
Tesseract?
It's in-dimensional space in mathematics, and it's fine. But like, I just, the realization that the work that you're doing,
she does love
to
math.
add this, I have a sticker on my phone that says I heart math. Anyway, how, like, if we contract with you, and let's say we do a collaboration to where we take some of these herbs and we put them into our brewing, like how much more we can accentuate some of these nuanced flavors. I mean, talk about such a fine tune of flavor profile when you like just add the dimension that herbs could offer. I'm very excited by this.
Well, again, I want to reiterate the point that human beings have been brewing with herbs for far longer than they have been brewing with hops. And Lauren's point was well taken, that hops are also an herb as well. But
well, but
we've become kind of primary in utilizing that. Would you consider spruce tips an herb?
Yes.
Okay, because I've brewed with that. You've brewed with that.
Yeah.
That's a.
When does it become not an herb?
When is a weed not a weed?
That's a good question.
Like anything can be an herb. Like I guess I use herb pretty broadly in what I grow, but I'm also I used to do a CSA, which if you're familiar, like community supported agriculture, like, you know how folks get a box of vegetables once a week from a farm. Yeah. So I did that, but with herbs, and I would include acorn squash in that as an herb. So for the, you know, nutritional and medicinal value of that plant. So you can use herb pretty broadly.
And that's going to wrap up this episode of Respecting the Beer. You know, when you hear my voice, it's a two-parter, so come back next week as we hear the rest of the Herbiery's story and how they take a farm-to-pint approach to the beer they serve. If you're in Madison, Wisconsin, be sure to check them out. They do have a tap room open. It's only open on specific days, so check out herbiery.com or visit the link in the show notes. As always, Respecting the Beer is produced by me, David Kelso, with music by Sarah Lynn Huss. Be sure to follow the Facebook page to stay up to date between episodes, and support the show over on Patreon. You get episodes a week ahead of time, access to exclusive beer, and you can watch a full hour-long tour of the brewery. Until next time, please remember to respect the beer.